The last major work of Herbert Armstrong in his life was The Mystery of the Ages, the book Mystery of the Ages. It was published in 1985. Mr. Armstrong died in January of 1986. The book was sent to all the head of households, all the church member head of households, and a less expensive version was given away to the public, and I understand they give away hundreds of thousands of copies of it. After the breakup of the Worldwide Church of God, one of the successor churches, the Philadelphia Church of God, started to publish its own edition for its own use in its public outreach. And as soon as they did, there arose a legal dispute over the copyright. The post-Armstrong leadership of Worldwide asserted their ownership and assured the public that they continued to publish the book. Philadelphia, on the other hand, asserted the book was a statement of faith, and because of that, it fell under the First Amendment and could not be copyrighted, or the copyright wasn't valid or enforceable. The dispute went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled that Worldwide still held the copyright, but that became a moot point because soon after, Philadelphia and Worldwide settled for an undisclosed payment. And Philadelphia today, even today, publishes The Mystery of the Ages as a book, or you can download it from their website. The text can also be found on various Churches of God websites or in book form on some sites, including the z-library.org, which has over 11 million books. Now, there are also because I checked last night, there's 103 used copies of The Mystery of the Ages for sale on Amazon for as low as $1.89 a copy. Wow. But with this book, Mr. Armstrong explains 7 great mysteries in God's relationship with humanity. The mysteries he lists are who and what is God, the mystery of angels and evil spirits, the mystery of man, the mystery of civilization, mystery of Israel, the mystery of the church, and the mystery of the kingdom of God. And these are important topics. They're important really for all Christians to read, especially Christians in the church. And however, I would note that the style and some of the way in which the content is expressed were really oriented at prior generations. And would we set out to explain these today to the current demographics that the church attempts to reach out to, we would phrase some things differently. But I say this even as this increasingly secular world needs to know God, His Son, and His plan of salvation. My purpose for mentioning the book, written almost 2 generations prior to today, is to say that eternal truths are really eternal. And I want to discuss chapter 2, the mystery of angels and evil spirits. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 7, Hebrews 1:7, God plainly tells us that His angels are there to act as His agents to serve humanity, and especially those He is calling in this age. Hebrews 1:7 in the Net Bible says, "And He says to the angels, He makes His angels winds and His ministers a flame of fire." And down in verse 14 of Hebrews 1, he concludes this thought by saying, "Are they not all ministering spirits sent to those who will inherit salvation?" Now, we expect that eventually all humans will be able to inherit salvation. There are a number of different types of angels mentioned in Scripture. For example, in Revelation 1 verse 4, John records there are 7 spirits who are before God's throne. 7 spirits are mentioned by John elsewhere 3 times in Revelation. Daniel chapter 4 verse 17 records spirits being called watchers. On page 68 of The Mystery of the Ages, Mr. Armstrong wrote, quote, "God has had angels specifically assigned to supervise and protect His church throughout all of its history," and he cites 10 verses in Revelation. One of these verses I would like to read is Revelation chapter 1 and verse 20. Revelation 1:20, which reads, "The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." So each church has an angel assigned to it. The last point I want to draw out about angels is to quote from page 70 of the hardback edition, where Mr. Armstrong writes of God. He says, God created them, number 1, created them with minds capable of thinking, reasoning, making choices and decisions with self-will. And number 2, revealed plainly to them His truth and righteous way, and of necessity allowing them free moral agency in accepting God's way or turning to contrary ways of their own devising. In other words, angels are what we would call today sentient beings. They're self-aware, thinking beings that have free moral agency. This fact is essential to remember when reviewing the next subject of the chapter, because the chapter is angels and evil spirits. And this is also a key aspect of God's plan of salvation for humanity. So if we could also turn to Job 38, Job chapter 38. I think it's around page 500. 420, thank you. Where God answered Job out of the whirlwind. And Job 38, starting in verse 4, and he asked Job this rhetorical question. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you possess understanding. Who sets its measurements, if you know, or who stretched a measure line across it? Or on what were its bases set? Or who laid the cornerstone? And verse 7 of Job 38. When the morning stars sang in chorus, the angels, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. This is an open question philosophically, I hear in the church, about God. Did God create time as we know it? But clearly here in verse 4, God asks a question relating to a simple sequence. He knows the answer, of course, before he asks it. You know, where were you when I laid the foundations? Of course, Job didn't exist yet. And when the morning stars sang in the chorus and all the sons of God shouted for joy, it's another issue of sequence in verse 7. Job was not alive at the time the foundations were laid. In the sequence of events, Job was born later. Verse 7 clearly shows the angels existed before the earth was created, again in sequence. So however many years that was, we cannot yet know. But the issue is not a matter of time, but an issue of how much time. But at some point after the angels were created, the angels were sinned and were cast out of heaven. And for your notes, and as a suggested assignment, please read Isaiah chapter 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28, because these discuss in some imagery language what happened with Lucifer and how the angel Lucifer came to have such a high opinion of himself that he attempted to usurp God's throne, to replace God, to sit on God's throne itself. In coming to this point, Lucifer committed the first sin, but he didn't stop there. He kept sinning. He kept going. You know, it's endless doubling down. He also brought his way of thinking to the entire community of angels, and some of them succumbed to it. According to Revelation 12, verse 4, about a third of the angels followed him to redefine their relationship with God. And in the process, they all sinned. And for that, they were cast out of heaven. But our Creator God has wisdom and the power to, as the Marine motto is, adapt, improvise, and overcome, to any attempt to thwart His plans. And He turned the rebellion into a tool to use in His plan of salvation. And we first start to see His work in the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God and ate the forbidden fruit. And at this point, Lucifer, prior to this point, of course, Lucifer had become the adversary of God, and now he was mucking around in God's direct creation of humans, and he was becoming an adversary of God in the human domain, which is mainly where Lucifer, or Satan, exercises his adversarial position. He is an adversary to God by human proxies or human agents. And thus he became the adversary, and the angels who followed him became, in some ways, lesser adversaries. Satan deceives all humanity, sometimes even those in the church, who let their guard down and who ignore the weapons of spiritual warfare that God does give us. God created humans also to be self-aware or sentient beings with free moral agency. The major difference between humans and angels is that humans are mortal. Humans also are unable to sense when spirit beings are trying to influence them. When a thought or idea comes into your mind, where did it come from? Did it come from your subconscious, or did it come from spiritual influences? You know, the talk show host Rush Limbaugh made popular the concept of a media montage. He would play videos or sound bites of various people in the news media, all saying the exact same thing in the exact same way. And I recall hearing a montage recently about events that occurred recently at the Capitol Hill that ran more than 10 minutes. It was sobering. You know, it was sobering from a spiritual standpoint. What causes so many otherwise intelligent people to all say the same thing? And what compels them to do so? And I think, my personal opinion is, it's pretty good proof that we're seeing spiritual forces at work in real time, in front of our eyes, influencing society. When Jesus lived on earth and openly performed miracles, he cast out many demons who were vexing people, some horribly, throwing young people in the fire and so on. In Luke chapter 8, Jesus even cast out a colony of demons known as Legion from a man who promptly shocked everyone by becoming passive and rational. And as a measure of demonic sanity, Legion asked Jesus to be allowed to inhabit a herd of pigs, which were promptly drowned. While there is actually quite a few scriptures that inform us a little about angels, only two are named, Gabriel and Michael, and I strongly suspect that the reason God did this is he only tells us about what we need to know at the time, because some foolish people are tempted to make angels the object of worship. And there are quite a few websites about that exact subject, and that will tell you all manner of foolish nonsense about angels, including I saw a long list of names and rank and all other detail. That's just irresponsible speculation. God will judge angels who sinned at the right moment in time for his plan of salvation. And this is hinted at with the episode about casting Legion out. In Luke 8:31 it says, "And they," that is the demons, "began to beg him not to order them to depart into the abyss," sort of in a reference to what they know their fate is going to be. And this will be a day when God intends that Satan and the angels who follow him will be removed from any contact from anyone else. And that is implied in 2 Peter chapter 3, starting in verse 10. 2 Peter 3:10, where it says, "But the day of the Lord will come as like a thief, and the heavens will disappear with a rushing noise, and the celestial bodies will be destroyed by being burnt up, and the earth and its deeds done on it will be disclosed." Now I think this is kind of like, if I may, sort of like a reverse Big Bang. It's almost like all of this material turns back to energy instantly and goes back to God. Because all these things are being destroyed in this way, what sort of people must you be in holy behavior and godliness, while waiting for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by being burned up, and celestial bodies will melt as they are consumed by heat. But it's not fire as we know fire. It's going to be it's a nuclear event. It's a complete revocation of all the energy that was put into the creation. But according to his promise, we are waiting for a new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness resides, and by implication, in which no unrighteousness resides. Now, of course, we cover a lot about Satan when it comes to the Feast of Atonement, and I hope you perceive I'm trying not to have much duplication or overlap. As odd as it may seem, as much death and suffering like the demons have caused humanity, their activity helps accomplish God's plan of salvation, to help God separate the sheep from the goats, to separate from the wheat from the tares. And we have this in the plain words of Jesus in the parable of the tares in Matthew 13, verse 25, where he says, "Well then, let both grow together unto the harvest. And at the harvest time I will tell the reapers, first collect the weeds and tie them into bundles to be burned, and then gather the wheat into my barn." And I think that is why Lucifer decided to be an adversary to the Creator of God, is the issue, this issue of why he did become an adversary begs to be thought about and worked on a bit. But I want to do that in an entirely different circumstance. And if that is not sobering enough, let us close with this point. In John 8:44, Jesus told a group of Pharisees directly to their face that they were the children of their father Satan. And what they wanted to do, they wanted to do their father's desires. Satan was a murderer and a liar and the father of lies. But this did not end with the passing of these people. This was always the case in the human experience, and this is the case at this very moment. There are people on earth right now who are willingly carrying out the desires of their spiritual father, the devil. We see these people on the news every day. Many wear nice clothes and have high office or important titles. You may even know some of their names if they are public figures. Some work in the media. Some will come against the children of God with the same wrath their father, the devil, will have at the time when he knows his time is short. So before I end this, I want to mention that UCG has 2 booklets on the subject that can be downloaded. Angels, God's Messengers, and Spirit Army. And the other booklet is There a Real Devil? God's plan of salvation is being executed today, step by step. We are close to the final phases. And it is time for the bride to make herself ready.